Hi, my name is Dr. Rebekah Dyer, and today I'll be sharing a presentation with you about the successful inclusion of children with autism spectrum disorder in disability ministry programs. I'll start with telling you a little bit about myself. I'm a full professor at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona, in the College of Education. I've been in the field of education for about 18 years. And I work with the Dyslexia Association, as well as I'm the advisor for two clubs on campus at GCU. They both focus on the inclusion of individuals with disabilities. Some of the research that I will share with you today, I also was able to present at an international autism conference in China. And I also work with Johnny and Friends as a subject matter expert. I'd like to start our time today with a special verse that I feel really aligns with what we'll be talking about today. It's 1 Corinthians 12:24-27. But God has combined the members of the body and has given the greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part honored, every part rejoices with it. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. As we go through the presentation today, these are the different things that we'll be discussing. We'll first look at the definition of autism spectrum disorder and the different components involved. We'll also define inclusion. We'll look at the theoretical foundation about inclusion, models of inclusion. I'll share with you some of the research that I did about disability ministry programs, and then we'll go over some very specific strategies for inclusion in churches. What is autism spectrum disorder? If you'll see here the visual I have, you'll see it's definitely a spectrum. You will meet one person with autism and then meet another person with autism, and they could be nothing alike. It is very different depending on the individual. Here we have different levels. So you have level 1, which is high functioning autism with different characteristics. Level 2 is autism, and then level 3 is more severe autism. Some of the components that we know are involved are social withdrawal, which can include showing little interest in making friends, preferring spending time alone, having difficulty showing empathy, showing little response to smiles or eye contact. Another characteristic could be impairment in communication symptoms. This may mean that they develop speech slowly, have an inability to initiate or sustain conversation. They may repeat words or phrases, have an inability to generalize, maybe very literal, and have unusual intonation, rate, or volume of speech. Also, they often, but not always, have unusual patterns of behavior such as repetitive body movements, restricted range of interest or attachment to objects, and resistance to change in routine. Again, these are examples of characteristics, and it's going to be different for every individual. What is it like to live with autism spectrum disorder? I'm going to take a moment to show you a short clip of a video that will help you see some of this being explained by someone who actually has autism.
Get cured of autism. But what you do is you learn better, you learn more and more things.
Well, I didn't speak until I was 4. Now I have a BA and a master's, and I'm studying for my doctorate.
I can remember the frustration of not being able to talk. I couldn't get my words out. My speech came in gradually, a few words at a time. When I was a little kid, I was very autistic, nonverbal, rocking. You know, that's the kind of kid they just put away in the institution. But I had a speech teacher that worked really hard with me, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of young children getting early intervention. You got a 2-year-old or 3-year-old with no speech, don't wait. High school was absolutely worst part of my life. Teasing, teasing, teasing. I got kicked out of school for throwing a book at a girl. Teased me because, you know, teasing really made my life miserable. And the only places I could get away from teasing was the specialized activities. Things like horseback riding, electronics lab, model rocket club. The line was drawn in the sand. I was not allowed to become a recluse in my room. I had to get out and do things. always kind of baffled at just how illogical people are in their thinking. I'm very logical in my thinking. But when I was younger, I didn't know that other people thought more in words. You see, I think in pictures. If I don't have a picture, I don't think. And my mind is very, very associative. Being a visual thinker, I tend to put things into categories. You see, autism is a very big spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, you got half the people at Silicon Valley. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got somebody who's very handicapped, remains nonverbal, is going to have to live in a supervised living situation. Really, really big spectrum. And, you know, Einstein probably be labeled autistic today in a lot of school systems because he had no speech until age 3. I'm interested in seeing something that makes real change. I've done a lot of work that's made a lot of improvements in the livestock industry, and I think I've helped a lot of kids succeed. I want to see the kids that are like me succeed. That's the kind of stuff that makes me happy, when I see the things that I do make a difference.
I hope that you found that to be beneficial, to just hear from someone who actually has autism themselves. I think it offers a great perspective for those of us that are trying to learn more to ensure that we can support them in the best way possible. So if you haven't heard of Temple Grandin, definitely read up on her. She has lots of videos and books out there and offers a great perspective. So we really want to understand, as we're talking about inclusion, it's important that we kind of have the same definition of what is inclusion. While there is evidence that inclusion settings are beneficial for individuals with autism spectrum disorder, it is very important that all stakeholders agree on the definition. So if you're working with other individuals in your church and you don't have an agreed upon definition, it's something you'll want to discuss. Inclusion is not solely physical placement in an environment with non-disabled peers. It must also involve actual participation in the environment that is equitable to that of the non-disabled peers. So for example, it's not enough to have a wheelchair ramp to ensure someone in a wheelchair can get into the building. We want to make sure that they can also pull up to a table and be part of a group, that they know where those groups are and are able to navigate all of the things that are offered within the church. They need to have the same experience as everyone else. The increased desire for schools and other settings to include individuals with disabilities should incorporate specific efforts to ensure they can fully participate in all activities. Continuing on with inclusion, the term inclusion includes accommodations, which encompasses more than it has in the past. Accommodations do not just mean that the grounds and buildings need to be physically accessible. The accommodations to include individuals with disabilities need to be a specific design to meet the unique needs of the disability. There's two theories that support the research that I did, and then also to support why do we need to focus on inclusion of individuals with disabilities. So we'll talk about two different theories. The first one being the socialization theory. Socialization refers to the process through which individuals acquire social skills, behavior norms, and values of the culture that they're living in. The acquisition of these social skills makes it possible for the individual to become part of the society. The social skills needed, social understanding, and emotional maturity are skills that individuals with autism spectrum disorder struggle with significantly. It is helpful to explore the development of social skills. How do we, all of the individuals, how do we in our society develop social skills? The process of socialization occurs at different stages of development. The introduction to social skills for children starts with their families. As they grow older, they learn further social skills through their time at school, sometimes religious institutions as well, and eventually employment. The degree of social skills will vary as the child grows older and exposure to more life experiences increases. This can become an issue for children with autism spectrum disorder who may spend a significant amount of time with other children who have disabilities solely. They may not have the opportunity to learn appropriate age and socially acceptable social skills and behaviors from their peers due to not being included with them in school or other settings. So basically, if you think about a child with autism spectrum disorder, if in their school setting and their church setting or anywhere else they go, they're only included with other individuals with autism spectrum disorder, and together they all struggle with social skills, Where are they going to learn then the appropriate social skills and have real world opportunities to practice them? The family stress theory I found to be very interesting also in the alignment with talking about why do we need to include individuals with disabilities in churches. The family stress theory involves the need for a family to encompass a wider social system. This theory emphasizes the fact that families do not live in isolation, but are part of a larger ecosystem that includes genetic, historical, economic, cultural, and developmental influences. When a family is dealing with a stressor, such as having a child with autism spectrum disorder, the whole ecosystem becomes involved. Community plays a primary role in the development and maintenance of families. Families experience multiple stressors at a time, and the family stress theory emphasizes the relief family members can experience from that stress when they participate in a faith community. Having a child with a disability is included in the events that can add stress to a family. The faith community serves as an existing resource to minimize the impact of the stress the family is experiencing. We know that inclusion of individuals with disabilities, students, is happening in the school system. The United States Department of Education reports that in 2006, over 50% of students with disabilities spent the majority of their school day in the regular education classroom. That means that they were in the inclusion classroom, spending time with their non-disabled peers. Laws have progressed in the rights of students with disabilities, and schools are still working on catching up with those mandates and then increasing the amount of students who are included. Laws in the U.S. require that all students with disabilities have access to the general curriculum. In addition, the need for the modification of the general education curriculum cannot determine the removal from the general education classroom. There is a focus in the public school systems to participate in inclusion, provide the appropriate supports so that students with disabilities can be there with their non-disabled peers. Students with autism spectrum disorder who participated in the general education classroom have been found to have a higher IQ and higher communication scores. There is a positive influence that participation in the inclusion classroom can have on the social and communication skills of students with autism spectrum disorder. It also provides them with the opportunity to develop friendships with their non-disabled peers, opportunities that they may not have had otherwise. There are reciprocal benefits for students without disabilities who have participated in inclusive classrooms. These students developed an increased understanding of disabilities and how to support their peers with disabilities. So let's take a look at inclusion in the faith community. Individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are being included in a variety of community settings on an increasing basis. The need for full inclusion is noted and efforts are beginning in churches, which is great to see. In the early years of individuals with disabilities being included, the focus only included making all of the areas accessible, physical accessibility. The need for inclusion as a means of an opportunity to fully participate in the setting came later and is referred to as social inclusion. There has been significant research on the social inclusion of individuals with disabilities in school settings, but we still need more information about social inclusion in the community, including the faith community. Approximately 6.4 billion students in American public schools received special education services in 2015. They all had documented disabilities. So out of those students, at 6.4 billion, some of these students attend local churches with their families, while others do not feel welcome or accepted to do so. It has been determined that people with disabilities are one of the largest underrepresented groups in the world. The church is often just unprepared to meet their needs and the needs of their families. Many families of children with disabilities seek support from the faith community more than anything else in their community. Their priority is seeking a church is not always a place where they can feel they can grow spiritually, but rather a place that will accept their child. This has led some churches to reflect on their own preparedness to support individuals with disabilities. This includes the training of staff and volunteers, as well as altering the physical environment if needed. So what are some of the barriers to inclusion? We know there can be architectural barriers preventing individuals with disabilities from being able to physically access the location. There can also be a stigma regarding individuals with disabilities that can create attitudinal barriers, which is going to prevent them from feeling welcomed in the church. Individuals with disabilities can often have difficulty with communication due to the characteristics of their disability, including the need for sign language, hearing assistance, or having materials available in Braille. One of the biggest barriers that prevents inclusion in congregations are programmatic barriers, because there are no programs available that are completely accessible to individuals with disabilities. So I'm going to go into sharing with you a little bit about a research study that I conducted. It's called a case study of parental perceptions of disability ministry inclusion programs. I'll read the purpose of the study for you. This qualitative research study included individual, semi-structured interviews, a video recording of each of the disability ministry inclusion programs in 3 participating churches, and journals written by the parents about an experience they have had with their child in a disability ministry program. What does that mean? I'll break it down for you. So basically, I was able to have 3 churches included in the research study. Each church asked what parents might want to be involved. They were all parents who had children specifically with autism spectrum disorder. I was able to go observe in each of the churches and do a video recording of their disability ministry program. In addition, I interviewed each of the parents about what they were experiencing with their child in the church, how it impacted their child, how it impacted their family as well. And then I asked each of the parents to write a simple journal entry, just sharing with me an experience they have had in the church in the disability ministry program. And I'll be sharing more with you about that research study. As I conducted the research and I analyzed all of the different data that I collected, these were the top 6 things that came out of the research study. Successful inclusion, volunteer and staff involvement, emotional support, development of social skills, family support through faith and relief of stress, and effective behavior management. So now what I'm going to do is go through each one of these and share a specific piece of an interview or a journal entry or some type of data that connects with each of these things that came out of the research study. The first one is successful inclusion, and this is a quote from a parent. The experience was perfect for him as he got to experience church like everyone else, but was able to take breaks when needed and had more one-on-one time with his teacher. He really understood what was taught and enjoyed the entire week. So this is an example of a church that was able to have a child with autism spectrum disorder completely participate and be fully included, and you can see how positive it was for the child and the parent. Next is volunteer and staff involvement, which I'm sure you can understand how important that would be. This is a quote from a parent. I spent the walk from the car to the children's building, half dragging, half carrying him, and he sat down outside the check-in counter, refusing to move, about to go into full tantrum mode. I was contemplating sitting down and crying with him, since as Chris is getting bigger, he is harder for me to handle, and my husband was with our older son. When one of the 2 special needs ministry staff members swooped in, picked him up, and carried him into another room away from my near emotional breakdown. This surprised him so much that he snapped out of his crying and began laughing. I walked away thanking God for a staff who understood not only what my son needs, but also what I needed in that exact moment. That's a great example of volunteers and staff that knew that child, knew that mom, knew how to step in and help as soon as possible. And then we have emotional support. This parent shares, I was sent a brief video clip from one of the special needs leaders at church. It was of my son participating in the music part of service earlier that day. The sheer joy on his face was immense. Also, he was dancing along with the movements and singing the words very enthusiastically. He wasn't holding anything back. He was able to fully participate, not just in the curriculum, but in the worship portion of the service, which is going to help him make emotional connections with everything that's happening at church. Development of social skills. Another quote from a parent. He is always included to participate in the youth groups held during the week or weekends. One of the social groups at the church was recently held, and he had a great time and has made friends through the group. Also last summer, the same group asked him to be a helper during Vacation Bible School. He helped out with younger kids for a week and loved it. We enjoyed going every day to drop her off and picked him up with a big smile on her face. He felt so important and useful. The sense of community is wonderful, and you feel like you belong. This particular student or individual in the church was not only able to participate, but able to be a leader, which does increase the social skills of that individual. Now we'll look at family support through faith in relief of stress. A quote from a parent. For years, my husband and I had to take turns going to church alone, and we have a daughter that's typically developing. So one of us would bring her and then the other one and take turns. And sitting in church and looking at other families come as a family, come together, made us feel so isolated. And we'd always be rushing off after church in order to switch off, especially when there's multiple services. Then I could go to the early one and my husband would go to the later one. Now in the past year has been wonderful because we know we will always have someone there for John. We don't have to worry about a babysitter canceling on us when we did go to church together. This particular couple, they were going to church separately, different services, so someone could always stay home with the child with autism spectrum disorder until they started going to a church that had a disability ministry program where the child could be included, and then their family was able to go to church together. And then we have effective behavior management, another quote from a parent. Overall, the current church has been welcoming to our son because of his severe behavior problems. And since there were no special needs programs in our previous church, going to church was very difficult. And that's often what will happen is churches don't know how to handle severe behaviors, which can be a characteristic of autism spectrum disorder. And that leads to the family not feeling welcome in the church. What was the summary? What were the findings of the research I conducted? The findings of the research study supported the concept of including individuals with autism spectrum disorder in settings with their non-disabled peers. It also emphasized the value of having staff and volunteers who are knowledgeable regarding the specific needs of children with ASD. Additionally, the data demonstrated the support that can be provided to families through their participation in disability ministry inclusion programs. The participants shared the value of being able to take their child with ASD to a program where their behaviors will not be a deterrent or keep them from participating. What are some strategies that can be used to effectively have an inclusion program for individuals with autism spectrum disorder? I'm going to share a variety of them with you. First, I will say, instead of worrying about starting an entire program to welcome people with autism and their families, begin by welcoming one. Many faith communities that have successful programs for inclusive religious education began by determining the needs of the one child first presented to them. And I did find that to be true in the 3 churches I worked with my research. They all started organically, their disability ministry inclusion programs. A student came, didn't seem to fit into the regular programming, had individual unique needs, and that's where the program grew from there. One thing that's very important to consider is that the parents are the experts. So as you have a new person, a new individual come that has a disability, autism spectrum disorder specifically, you want to be connected with those parents right away and ask them everything. Learn as much as you can about the child. Ask them what they've experienced in the past. Have they been to a different church? Did they have a positive or negative experience? What worked, what didn't? Ask them what the child does for school, what works and what doesn't work. And also ask them what level of inclusion are they looking for, because each parent will feel differently about it. Some specific strategies are to attend to their communication. We know that their communication skills can be delayed. So, is communication happening, and how are they capable of communicating? Do they have verbal communication? Do we need to rely on pictures or communication device? Are we just pointing? Is there sign language involved? We need to know their level of communication. Avoid speaking in the negative. Make sure you're always, even if you're giving a direction, make sure you're keeping it positive. Visualize or sequence directions, include pictures with directions, or use pointing. Use shorter phrases to increase comprehension. Wait before repeating yourself. Definitely, especially wait until you have their attention before you repeat yourself. And avoid misunderstandings. We want to keep it simple and concise, any communication that we're using, and check for understanding. In addition, we need to prepare for transitions. Anytime we're going to change from one activity to another, or if something unexpected happens, transitions can be very difficult for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. So we might use a verbal countdown, say in 5 seconds, we're going to be moving to this, and count down so they're ready. Use concrete language that you know they're going to understand. And I really like and I really encourage picture schedules specifically. It can have the words with it, but it definitely needs to have a picture so you can point to what's going to be happening next. Some more strategies: using visuals to reinforce what we say, writing stories to help anticipate new situations. What would we do if, say, there was a virus and everything was shut down? It's called a social story, and there's lots of them out there, and even about the virus. So we want to help them walk through situations that might be intimidating to them. Think alongside the person. You want to physically be eye to eye with them, be at their level, and really try to understand their perspective. What are some behavior supports? The schedules are going to help a lot in being proactive versus reactive for behaviors. If they know what to expect, we can avoid a lot of behaviors. Predictability: allow for self-management. Let them work some things out sometimes. If they're not a danger to themselves or others, and they're maybe acting out a little bit, let them work that out as long as you can on their own. Make routines comfortable. As you have children continuing to come to your church repeatedly, make sure that routine for what it looks like when they come in is the same every time. And task analysis: that's just a breaking down into very small steps anything we're asking them to do. It's also a great idea to provide safe at home homework so that the parents can continue whatever they learned in church at home throughout the week. I'm going to leave you with another message from a parent who has a son with autism spectrum disorder. Inclusion is a blessing for both those with ASD and their neurotypical peers. Throughout Ben's childhood, we have endeavored to find a balance between putting typical peers in his school day to serve as role models and also getting him into a classroom that fits his academic needs. When he was younger, he was included in a regular class and was pulled out at different times of the day for individual academic work. I think this was beneficial when he was young and the other kids were very sweet to him. However, as he grew older and the gap between his progress and his peers' progress widened, we decided that a school dedicated to autism was what he needed, and he's been very successful there. I do believe places like church, sports, and community events should continue to try and include those with special needs. They are a part of our communities, and we are richer when we get to know them. Churches who are willing to provide a place for individuals with special needs are doing the right thing. These families need support and often feel as if they cannot attend church due to the needs of their child. When churches are willing to respond, the whole family can come and be a part of a faith community that can help them bear the many burdens, challenges, and blessings that come with having a child with special needs. We all need to feel connected to the kingdom of God. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation. If you have questions or ever want to continue the conversation about inclusion of individuals with ASD or disability ministry, feel free to email me and I would love to hear from you. Thank you.